Well, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome along to this webinar hosted by Jonathan Pagden and myself, Pippa Sawyer. And between us, we are Bucks Breakfast. And this webinar is part of the Bucks Business Festival, which started on Monday and continues through until next week. We've been lucky enough to interview a number of people who are hosting events as part of the festival. But this afternoon, the spotlight suddenly is on us. We're going to talk a little bit about the local radio landscape, a bit about Jonathan and myself, the technology behind Bucks Breakfast and how we do it, what makes us different from other local radio stations, and the most important bit, the benefits to local businesses from working with us. So before we kick off, Jonathan, we've got a very short video. Roll the tape.
You're listening to Bucks Breakfast, national and local news.
Good morning, it's 7 a.m. on Tuesday, the 8th of December. MPs have voted to reinstate sections of a new law. We like to think
that we're doing something that nobody else is doing, and that is offering familiar music, interesting, meaty, local topics of discussion, really great guests as well, and that local connection.
Those properties from flooding, we hope.
And so what are the difficulties of working in that particular street where the buildings there are so old?
I mean, it's unfortunate that it's a major route.
It isn't people shouting and talking way too fast and getting it all done in 30 seconds because we've got to get to the next commercial break. We are people of a certain age living in Buckinghamshire, talking to people of a certain age living in Buckinghamshire. We do radio that we would like to listen to.
Monday to Friday from 7 till 10, it's your Bucks Breakfast.
Bucks Breakfast was established in November of last year. It was a project that came out of lockdown. So first, let's just take a quick look at the landscape, because radio is changing at a really fast pace. So, Jonathan, tell us a little bit about the BBC.
Okay, the BBC in this area is represented by 3 counties, and the 3 counties it talks about are Bedfordshire, Hertfordshire and Buckinghamshire. So you can gather just from that title that they've got a very big patch to cover, and therefore they're spread fairly thinly, even with the famous BBC resources. They've still got a lot of county to cover and not that many people to do it with. What that means is that they do tend to concentrate on things that they know. Their studios are in Dunstable. They haven't even got a studio in Buckinghamshire. So although in theory we are in their patch, in practice it doesn't really show. There's also the content issue that they're very much journalists and journalistic and news. So their breakfast show, that's on at the same time as we are, is 100% talk. They do phone-ins, they do interviews, they do guests, they do reports from their reporters who've put packages together and all that sort of thing. And that is very labour-intensive and therefore quite expensive, and the BBC is undergoing yet another round of budget cuts. So we don't really see the BBC, or certainly not the BBC Local, as being competition for us because we're doing different things. And then on the other side of the screen, Mix 96, which has recently, as you'll be aware, morphed into Greatest Hits Radio. What that meant was that the parent company that Mix 96 were owned by, who had upwards of a dozen other stations around the country, they got swallowed up by an even bigger company, and the whole identity got erased. So now if you listen to what used to be Mix 96 in drive time, you will get travel news for, among other places, Canterbury and Exeter. That's really useful for people in Buckinghamshire. So we don't see them as competition either for 2 reasons. One is that they've got such a huge area, they're not really local anymore, but also because of the content of what they do. They are a music-based station. And the difference between speech-based and music-based is the whole attitude that a speech-based station, if they do play a tune, will play it to fill the gap before they talk again. And a music-based station, if they talk at all, will talk to fill the gap before the next piece of music. So they're not balanced, either of those. They're completely biased one way or the other in terms of the amount of content. At the other end of the size scale, there are a couple of community stations, both of which do a fantastically good job in the Buckinghamshire area. Wycombe Sound in High Wycombe and Red Kite, who are sort of Aylesbury, but in fact they're in Haddenham, but generally the north and the south of the county. But they are both community radio stations. What that means is that they're owned by community interest companies who are designed to not make a profit. And they have things built into their license from Ofcom, which says they have to provide a community service. So actually what they're about is not just making radio. They're about giving people in the community a chance to make radio for themselves, and to do it themselves, even though they may never have done anything like it before. And those two stations both do a great job of doing that. But what it means is that, for one thing, there is no consistency across the output. So the breakfast show can be completely different to the mid-morning, completely different to the afternoon, and then in the evening it gets totally different again, just because the content is steered by the people who are available to do it and are willing to do it, regardless of whether that fits in with the rest of the station, and regardless of how good they are at doing it, because that, to some extent, is not the point. The point is that they're being given an opportunity to do it. And in between those two extremes sits Buck's Breakfast. That's how we like to think of it. That's what we're aiming at, is to be not completely speech-based, but to have some speech. To be not completely music-based, but to have some music. To not be community-based so everybody can come and have a go, but to talk to the people around where we are, people in Buckinghamshire who are doing interesting things, who have started a new business or are walking 500 miles and then walking 500 more, and that sort of thing. So that is a gap, and we see ourselves as filling it. That is what we're about.
And actually, just to go back to Mix 96 being swallowed and morphed into Greatest Hits Radio, when that happened a couple of years ago, when that news first came into the public realm, a similar thing happened actually when Mix's sister station shut its doors in 2009. And there was a huge wave of support from local listeners for both of those stations, petitions, Facebook groups. And that just demonstrates the love for local radio. Greatest Hits Radio, they're great at what they do, but they are part of a multinational, a huge organisation, and that's run by business people. Yes, there's an element of business to Buck's Breakfast and to every small station and small company, but we're radio people, we're people. And I believe that that comes across in the programmes that we broadcast every weekday morning. So, Jonathan, time to just talk a little bit about us. Mm-hmm. Do you want to go first?
I will, if you like. We have got a little bit more to say first. Collectively, between the two of us, we are a small team. I mean, you are looking at the entire staff and on-air presence of Buck's Breakfast on these two screens, her and me. And we don't co-present as such. We'll come back to how we ended up doing it the way we're doing it in just a minute. But we are not the smart-ass bloke presenter cracking jokes all the time and the giggly girl. That was the very first thing we said, I think, was we are not going down that route. I mean, if anything, we're doing it the other way round, because Pippa is the presenter and I am the traffic and travel and news. And we'll get personal in just a minute about how we came to be where we are. But there is overlap. Of course there is. We talk to each other between times. We do the paper review together every morning, which is more than just listing what's on the front pages. So our personalities definitely come across. Mine does, even though what I'm doing is mostly putting across information, because I'm reading the news and then I'm doing the traffic and travel off the maps and the assorted information feeds. And I leave Pippa to do the talking. But we are both radio professionals. And what you're seeing is actually where we do it from. This is my working environment. That is Pippa's working environment. They are both home studios. We already had those. We didn't need to fit them up. And all we needed was the connections. And the modern technology has made it possible to do this with the very basic of kit. I mean, I've had to take the wall off the side of my booth in order to get the camera shot. That's how small my working environment is. Pippa's is slightly larger, but it's a corner of a larger cabin. We stream. We're not on FM. What that means is that we have a lot more freedom. And we think FM is very useful still. A lot of people still listen to it, but it's by far not the only way of doing it these days. It's not that long since it was the only way to do it. You were on medium wave or you were on VHF. That's going back a very long time, AM or FM. And those things still exist, but they are not exclusive, not anymore. So we're on websites. You can catch us on the mobile phone. You can say, should I say it? Should I say the A word? Alexa, and play Bucks Breakfast, and it does it. That's very clever. And we're only online, only live for those 3 hours between 7 and 10 in the morning. Those are peak periods. I'm going to hand to Pippa to tell us why we decided to do that.
You may or may not know, I used to run Wickham Sound. That's my background. I had a whole corporate career before I got made redundant, just before I was 40, and I went and did some radio training. And that's how I came to be in radio. And back in 2013, a group of us were sat round a table and we scribbled down some ideas on the back of an envelope. And out of that, Wickham Sound was born. And over 7 years working with that station, we won loads of awards that peaked last spring in an ARIA nomination. And the ARIAs are the Oscars, if you like, of the radio industry. And over that period, we pulled people out of retirement. We worked with young people with learning disabilities. We worked with community groups and so on. And we did an awful lot. And it was a very happy time of my life. But I left Wickham Sound last September, fancied a change and wanted to do something different, but staying in radio. And that's how Bucks Breakfast was born. A lot of people who had been, what's the word I'm looking for, had been made redundant as part of these big radio groups buying up lots of stations. Lots of people lost their jobs through that period, and dozens of new stations have popped up across the UK. And I thought I could do that. I could set up a whole new station for Buckinghamshire. But I've been there and done that. I want to do something different. You know, we're here in Bucks, the heart of entrepreneurs, the home of startups. Let's pioneer a new idea. And so that's how the idea of just doing the 3 hours, traditionally the biggest audience of the day, and do a daily live streamed breakfast show. And one day Jonathan called me. He said, "Hey, Pip, what are you up to?" And I told him, and he said,
as I remember, I said, "That sounds like more than a single voice job. Could I be the other voice, please?"
Yeah.
Or words to that effect.
And that's how the two of us came together. We've worked together right through the whole journey through Wickham Sound, so we know each other really well. We're a bit like an old radio married couple, aren't we, really?
It's a cliche, but it's probably true.
And so that's how the 3 hour breakfast show came about. And that's one thing that we do that nobody else is doing. We believe we are the first team in the UK to try this new format, and we've had a lot of interest from people around the country looking at what we're doing, and I think you might see other examples of it popping up, especially now that we're in this digital age with smart speakers and so much choice out there in radio world. Why should we try even to compete at 10 o'clock with Women's Hour on Radio 4, with Popmaster on Radio 2. Perhaps at 10 o'clock you are starting to get your head down and do some work. You might want classical music on in the background. You might want to turn to one of our other amazing local stations for pop music, competitions, interviews, and so on. It seemed silly to try and compete with that, and that's why we don't. So we're live from 7 till 10 every weekday morning, and then we switch off and we leave you to make your own choice from the wide range of services that are available, and they all do different things. They all serve different markets. They have a different sound and different areas of expertise. And it's working really well so far.
It is, though, a little bit disconcerting for somebody like me, for whom, for my whole career, silence is a thing to be avoided if at all possible. So if it's gone quiet, it means something horrendous has gone wrong. We better do something to fix it. But nowadays, at 10 o'clock, a tune finishes and it goes quiet, and that's how it should be. But it still makes me a little bit... I still, even after 6 months of it, I still get slightly jumpy just after 10 o'clock when it's gone quiet, because I can't help thinking we should be doing something. Now then, I would like to show you something that is black and white, but really ought to be sepia because it's so old. This is an insight into a different age, the Dark Ages. I want to show you a picture of me at the start of my career. How horrendous is that? That was taken in 1981. That is a BBC Mark III desk at the BBC in Leeds. I was 20 years old and I'd just finished what they called the A course, the basic training about, this is a meter, this is a microphone, that sort of thing. You will notice on that, not only are there no computers, there aren't even any CD players. This was before CDs. This studio had just been converted from mono to stereo transmission. That's how long I've been doing it. Obviously, I didn't stick at doing that, although I could still work that desk if you sat me in front of it there. I went on to work for the BBC Newsroom in London and on several other local stations, and then went freelance eventually and ended up doing corporate events and big shows. And these days, when the work is available, which hopefully it will be again sometime soon, I go out in the evenings and I am the big booming voice at an awards show. I'll give you a sample. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Cardboard Box of the Year Awards, or whatever. It's known as the Voice of God, which is a great job title. And naturally enough, not a lot of that has happened in the last 12 months or so. When it does come back, that will be evenings, and there's no reason why I shouldn't do both. So that's what I'm planning to do. But if it comes to a choice, I will be choosing Buck's Breakfast because it's much more my sort of thing. I am at home with that sort of radio and that sort of environment. As you can see from that picture, I've been doing it rather a long time, and now I'm going to get rid of that because I can't bear to look at it any longer.
And working from home is another benefit that we have. Yes, we're digital. We don't have a transmitter. We don't have the cost, the worry. Is the transmitter going to be safe over the winter in the gales? We don't have the cost of buying the licenses which go along with having FM transmitters. We may get asked later about DAB, and the large-scale DAB is too big for us. It covers too big an area. We are focused on a more intimate audience than that. There is something in the pipeline called small-scale DAB, and Ofcom have just started to roll that out. The first few licenses have been awarded, but it's not something that we're looking at, because I believe that by the time Ofcom come to license DAB in Buckinghamshire, I think smart speakers and internet technology will have overtaken the DAB format. So we never say never. We'll keep an eye on it, but it's not something that's in our sights at the moment. We both work from home. We are reliant on the internet, yes, of course, but isn't everybody these days? It does mean that we can keep our overheads to a minimum. It means we can be flexible and nimble, and we can change with the times as required. Shall we move on to the next slide, JP? So let's just look a little bit at the audience that we're targeting. And again, this is something that sets Bucks Breakfast apart from all the other local radio services, which is a great thing because it means depending on what it is you're trying to take to market, there is a radio station to suit every need. We are serving people like us, people who are 45 and over. We're both a little bit more over, but we won't go there.
Some of us more than others.
ABC ones, aged 45 and over. That's our target market. And these people are empty nesters. They're people in senior management. They're working from home. They might be small business owners. And they enjoy the arts and entertainment, the great outdoors, lifestyle, good quality food and drink. They've got a bit of money in the pocket to spend, and that is the target market for us. And being digital means we can see exactly how many people are listening at any time of day, which on the one hand is great, but we can also see if we've got a counsellor on who's droning on and on and on about his favourite project, we can see those numbers dropping off as well. And so it's fascinating, actually, and it can be a bit of a distraction, but we can see every minute of every programme, those audience numbers going up. And not so much now, because if somebody doesn't perform well, they don't get invited back. What it means is that week by week, as we go on, we can hone the content to exactly what our audience is responding to. So lifestyle, the great outdoors, chefs, events, and small business matters. That's the target for us. And you know, if you are marketing the latest trainers which are inspired by some hip hop star, then we're probably not the station. We're almost certainly not the station for you. And we'll be honest and tell you that. And we'll recommend other outlets that might reach that audience better for you. Because actually, whilst it won't work for you, it wouldn't work for us either, because we know that that's not what our audience are interested in. And it's in our interests to give our audience what they want. I was chatting to an artist friend a couple of years ago, and he'd just completed a beautiful painting. And I said, you know, how on earth can you part with it? How can you sell it, having put so much love and so much time into this piece of art? And he said, I'm not going to sell it. I don't sell what I paint what I sell. And actually, when he goes off to art exhibitions and so on, he sells seascapes because that is what sells. So he keeps his favorite piece of art for himself because that's what his love has gone into. I'm starting to sound like I don't love what I do, but I do. What I'm trying to say is that we are honing our content week by week by watching what the audience is responding to, and that helps us to make the programme better and better each week.
Pippa, I'm going to interrupt you for a moment. Suzanne has got to go. It's nice to see you, if briefly, and we'll contact again sometime soon. Thanks.
Okay. Thanks, Suzanne. So that's our audience, and they always say, don't they, have your audience member in mind when you're broadcasting or when you're working out a marketing plan. And just think of this, you know, somebody who is 60 now was 20 back in 1981. So they were possibly a punk rocker or a post-punk rocker at the time. Nowadays, in 2021, he might be more concerned with whether that petrol mower is going to start when he gets it out of the shed for the first time. And that's great because it means that we can play music and we can talk about things that cover that entire span. And what we're not doing, conversely, is pumping out the latest top 20 pop hits because we're not trying to appease the parent with the kids in the car on the school run. That's a different market, and there are other stations that serve that market very well indeed.
And if you're wondering, yes, Pippa did just describe me.
We start with a gentle start in the morning because not everybody is getting up and rushing about to get onto the school run or to get onto the commute. This is certainly true through lockdown, with many more people working at home. And actually, research shows that traditional breakfast show from 6 till 9 has shifted somewhat. And we'll be watching that research closely to see if people return to the office and to the commute, whether those peak audiences in the breakfast show move back to a slightly earlier time that we saw pre-pandemic. So we start gently. We have familiar things in the breakfast show that you would expect to see, the newspaper front pages, the local news, the traffic and travel bulletin, and also I invite you to pandiculate with Pippa every morning at around about 10 past 7. And this is something that I've become quite known for locally. I was at an event a couple of years ago and a lady came up to me and she said, are you the woman that does the pandiculation? If you're not familiar with it, pandiculation is just a fancy word for having a stretch and a yawn in the morning. But actually, there's quite a lot of science behind it. And it's just part of our regular start to the programme, starting gently, ramping up through the 3 hours. And of course, our catchphrase is the antidote to shouty radio. And that's another thing that sets us apart.
Mm. And to summarise it and to restate what we said earlier, we make the music, make radio for people like us. We do things that we would like to listen to.
I mentioned research briefly, and there is a body called Radio Centre, which represents all of commercial radio, and that's, you know, right up to those biggest brand names that we all know and love. And their research shows that 8 million people who are working from home listen to commercial radio each week. 8 million people, and they're itching to spend their money. So that's something that we've been watching as well. Okay, Jonathan, shall we look at what local business gets from working with us?
Let's, yes. Well, we've already said that the audience is people like us, people who are mature, of a certain age, who like things that they can think about. And also, because of the age that they're at and the assumed level of intelligence, they're people in a position to spend money. Maybe not even their own money. They might be in a spending authorization position at work. So if a business advertises, they hear it, they think, that'd be useful at the office or whatever. They've actually got the power to make it happen. The working from home effect, I think we've already dealt with a little bit, but it's also worth mentioning that Radio Centre, as mentioned just now, have also isolated the person working and therefore most usually sitting at a computer. If they're working from home, they'll be on the phone or they'll be at a computer. If they hear something on the radio, they're in a position to actually go and look for it straight away, instantly. Even, if they hear a commercial, they can be on the website before the commercial's even finished. And that's something that's never actually happened before. They're calling it the working from home effect, or WFH effect. That's another set of initials that meant nothing to anybody before 12 months ago. But nowadays, you say WFH and everybody knows what you mean.
Yeah. Talking of commercials, there is research out there which shows that listeners are put off by hearing too many commercials. Now, just a note that research is largely done with those big brands, the Capital Radios, the LBCs of this world, and so on. But I think it does have an impact in local radio as well, and that's why it's good for stations like us to be able to offer different solutions to businesses. We're not regulated by Ofcom because we don't have FM or DAB transmitters. So whilst we operate to broadcast standards, quality standards, because we have integrity and we're good people, it does mean that we can use different methods of getting business messages to the listener. And we're quite careful in the way that we do that. So we use words to let the listener know that a commercial relationship exists. But it does mean that business messages, promotional material and content can be far more part of the editorial, part of the program, and not just an interruption almost of a commercial break. The other benefit to that, of course, is that getting a complex message into a 30-second commercial is a very fine art. And if you don't have to do that, then that's even better. So some of the packages that we offer to local businesses include, for example, a featured interview. So that's where we have a longer format conversation with a business about a product or a service, which enables us in a conversational style to get all of those features and benefits across. And then that is then underpinned by a commercial advertising campaign, which just reminds the listener of that message that we're getting across.
It's worth mentioning also about the style of the commercials. And I've got a sort of personal reminiscence here that a good few years ago, I did a voiceover at home for a commercial. I can't even remember what it was for, but it was one of those sort of amateur dramatic type commercials where they try to make a scenario, explain the problem, put their product forward as a solution, and give all the terms and conditions, all in 30 seconds. And I only saw my bit of the script. But then a few months later, I was driving round the Aylesbury Ring Road and I heard it on Mix 96. And the only reason I recognised it was because I recognised my own voice. It had gone through so many bits of committee meetings and extra production and changes that in the end it didn't actually mean anything. And the fact that I can't remember who it was for shows you, I mean, I'm not sure I was clear at the time who it was for. And the last 10 seconds or so of this 30 seconds was filled with somebody talking very fast about terms and conditions apply. That sort of thing. You've heard it. It's statutory wording. They have to say that if they're in certain parts of industries. But it makes no sense at all. It detracts from what they've just said about the commercial. And the fact that they have to do it is the only reason that they do it. And we don't have to. It's as simple as that.
Other benefits by working with Bucks Breakfast. We're a small team. We're nimble. We don't have to go upstairs to get decisions signed off. We can work quickly, and that is great for small local businesses, because if, for example, we're selling, I don't know, garden furniture and so on, and the weather changes, we can change your message. We can change your message within 24 hours. If lockdown, God forbid, comes back in and that roadmap goes wonky, we can react quickly and get your message changed. We can get you on for an interview at a moment's notice. So that is definitely a benefit. We're known in the local area, certainly around the Wickham area and around south of the county. We're getting more well known in the north of the county. And we're friendly as well. You know, we're not talking down to people. We're not news announcers. We are your friend in the morning. And when you switch on, you hear Jonathan read the news at 7, you can relax and think, everything's okay with the world. We offer a lot of different options for working with us. There's sponsorship, which is great for longer term awareness, brand building and brand awareness, spot commercials for that very quick call to action, packages including editorial content. Of course, we're online as well, so we've got the whole Listen Again platform. And incidentally, you don't need to wade through a 3-hour program to find your interview from this morning, because it's there, it's clipped, it's ready to go. And when you press go, then you are straight into the interview. No wading through all the music first of all. So those are some of the benefits. We've been working with a number of businesses since our launch, and Jonathan, you've got a positive experience to share.
Oh, yes, I have, haven't I? Bear with me a moment. I'm just going to jump forward a little bit. There we are. This is a quote we got just this week. We didn't ask for it. They sent it. And I will read it to you. This is from a company that did the featured interview bit. So they had a 30-second commercial that's run for 4 weeks. And towards the end of the first week, when the listeners can be assumed to have heard the commercial at least once, we put them in as a featured interview. And the way we do that is that I do the interview and we pre-record it. So this is the difference between the featured interview and the everyday interview, if you want to call it that, is that the everyday interview will be live, usually, and it will always be done by Pippa. Because that way, it's like you're sitting around a table in your local coffee shop with Pippa, and a friend of hers comes in and sits down and says, hello, how are you doing? What are you up to at the moment? That sort of conversational type interview. The featured interview is different because the client is paying for it. We make it clear that they're paying for it. But that means that they can get to not veto it, but they can certainly listen to it before it goes on the radio, just in case they gave a wrong impression. And I wouldn't know if they've given a wrong impression because I'm finding out, I'm just listening to what they're saying. And unless it's glaringly obvious that they've said something they didn't actually intend, then I'm not going to know. Only they will know that. So we give them the chance to listen to the interview before it goes on the radio. And then when it comes to interview day, the day of putting it on the radio, Pippa will say something like, well, over this week, you've heard several times this commercial, and play the commercial immediately before the interview. And then, so we thought we'd find out a little bit more than you can say in 30 seconds. Let's have a talk to the CEO. And off comes the interview for 6 or 7 minutes. So this company did that. And this is what they said. Buck's Breakfast provided an excellent way to launch our business in our local market with an interview and an advert online. We were delighted to receive visitors directly from the links posted on their website, tracked via Google Analytics. Business-to-business marketing and business radio really work well hand in hand. Thanks, Buck's Breakfast, and all the very best in your endeavours. So in other words, as Pippa was saying about being able to measure how many people are listening, they can measure, because they've got Google Analytics, exactly where the hits on their website came from. And some of them came from us. So the only reason that people will have been listening to that interview on our website is that they've already heard it on our program, because that's the listen again function. And then there was another one, which admittedly was not a featured interview, but this is somebody who came on to talk about what they were up to. Thanks for having us as a guest on your show.
Sorry, Jonathan, just to say that was a not-for-profit.
Which one? This second one?
The second one, yeah.
Okay. Thanks for having us as a guest on your show. We've already received several phone calls and emails after the show. Catch up soon. So in other words, they are people who are doing a good job. If they're a not-for-profit, that means that the reason that they're doing what they do is not to make money. They're doing it for a cause. I'm not sure actually what that cause was offhand, but it doesn't matter. They got a response. They got results. They got people contacting them because they'd heard about it on Buck's Breakfast. That, in the end, is why anybody comes on the radio, is because they want a response from the people who are listening. Yeah. And it works. It works.
And actually, that first one is really interesting because that was a business-to-business client. He had a product that he wanted to reach business owners with. Of course, we all think of radio as being a business-to-consumer type medium, but we've just proved there that it works for business-to-business as well, particularly for us because we are reaching those decision makers and those budget holders as they're working from home. Just coming to the last slide now, and I just want to read a quote which I found earlier this morning. This is from Charles Vallance. He's the founder of VCCP, which is one of the top 5 creative agencies. And he says, "We're in the era of the ear. Brands should be heard as much as they are seen." And that is him thinking in terms of smart speakers, in terms of all of the social media platforms really now embracing audio. And it demonstrates the power of the human voice and the imagination. And it means that, there are marketing opportunities for you to reach listeners and consumers, and they don't need to be sat in front of a screen to benefit. And that is Buck's Breakfast. That's what we're all about. We've got one short, just a few things to tell you about that we can do aside from the radio broadcasting. Jonathan, do you just want to just run through those quickly?
Yeah, I'll just step back a little bit because we sped through it. We both have been self-employed for many years. We work freelance, and one of the beauties of Buck's Breakfast is that it's not an every waking hour occupation, unlike running a radio station. That was another reason for not making it a whole radio station. So although we have things to organise outside the on-air times, we're not responsible for what loads of other people are doing. So we both have time to do other things. And this is something fairly unique, that we can train you in how to be interviewed and how to be a guest on a radio programme like ours in a completely lifelike simulation, because you will be doing it in exactly the same way, the only difference being that the live button isn't pressed at our end. So most of our interviews are done over Zoom calls. You just connect to a Zoom call with a link in the usual sort of way, and then we connect it to the radio. So if we want to show you how to be interviewed, if you want some training and to be able to stop and say, well, actually, could I just do it that way? And what happens if? And that sort of thing. We can do that. It would cost money. Of course it would. It's an extra venture of ours, which would help us to run Buck's Breakfast. So you can practice. That's the great thing about it. It's not just a 1 hour training session and then you've got to make sense of your notes afterwards. We can actually give you some practice. That also, as a byproduct, would give you expertise and a little bit of experience and a little bit of smoothness in how to do Zoom calls, in how to do a presentation over a Zoom call or something like that. We can help you with that as well. We can give technical advice on the best kit to have, the best way to get it set up. But also, we can sit there and listen to you do it and then give you some advice on how to come across better. We can also turn any campaign you've got into a podcast for our use or for your use. So, for example, if we want, as part of the featured interview package, a 7-minute interview, and the interview, when we do it, runs to 25 minutes, fine, we'll just clip the 7 minutes that makes the most sense as a standalone for the radio. But then, if the whole 25 minutes is good listening material, then let's use it for something else. We don't just delete it, we'll use it for something else, so turn it into a podcast. We can do that for you, we can give you the audio to do it for yourself, or whatever you want to do with it. It's there if you want. Also, if you have a plan for a podcast, and you want it to be a little bit smoother than just saying, hello, is this working? Hello, welcome to my podcast, sort of thing. How about some professional presentation at the beginning and the end? We can do that for you as well. So use our voices in your material, use our expertise to get your material working better, and put it to more uses because, as Pippa just said, it's the era of the ear. So radio has changed. What we mean by the word has changed, but the power of it hasn't. It's just got more flexible.
And that is Buck's Breakfast. Thank you. Does anybody have any questions for us?
So the point at which you can unmute if you want to.
No.
What
No questions? Richard.
What sort of unique IPs and your total sessions are? How's it going?
Can we say that again?
Your unique IPs and your total sessions you get.
Listening figures, Pip.
Yeah.
Well, we're not going to get into listening figures because I think that's a mug's game. And as we said earlier, it's about the impact that you can make, and it's about demonstrating that you're reaching the target audience. We've talked about the sorts of people that we are targeting. We've talked about the content that we are creating, and we've started to demonstrate the impact of that. I could say we reach 20,000 people a week, but if they're the wrong 20,000 people, it's useless. Any listener figures are always there's always an element of, well, stick your finger in the air. Even if you look at the radar numbers, and radar is the industry standard, when you actually look at the sample size and how far those numbers have been extrapolated, it's actually meaningless. And those numbers are not for local radio markets. Those are for the big guys. Those are for big national brands, and it just enables the trading process between advertising agencies, media buyers, and radio stations. I really don't believe it is applicable in the local area. It's far more about impact. We are a fairly new station. We're just 6 months on air. We're still growing at the moment. What I can tell you is that when we looked at the numbers that we have from February to March, our audience doubled.
And that is the unique IPs. That is not the same people coming back again and again.
Yeah. And we've demonstrated the impact. We've got a fantastic testimonial there, and we're sure it's going to grow, continue to grow, and get better. So I'm afraid I'm not going to give you a number, Richard.
But the trend is a good one, though.
The trend is a good one, and I think the message is that we've told you the audience that we are aiming for, the audience that we are reaching, and if that's the audience that you're trying to reach, then we need to talk. That's all I can say on that. I hope that sort of answers your question.
Yeah, that's great. You're doing well.
Any more questions?
Well, either everybody's asleep or we've answered everything before it was asked.
Marvellous. Well, I think on that point then we should say goodbye. Thank you for spending nearly an hour with us this afternoon. We will put all of this information online. Enjoy the rest of your Friday afternoon, and please tune in on Monday morning at 7 on bucksbreakfast.co.uk. Thank you very much indeed.